let's talk about the active shooter course. Let's talk about it. This course going to be all about control during times of chaos. And more importantly, why the key skill we need to build is decisive thinking and action under pressure. So let me give you a little way to think about this to really make it hit home for you. All right. I often hear people say, hey, we hope it's never going to happen to us. But let me give you a scenario. So imagine your child and they're in a classroom and they've got the nice soft hum of the air conditioner. You hear the nice scrape of the chairs, the friends just murmuring nice and gently to each other. Everything's normal until it isn't. There's a sound at the door, maybe a shadow underneath the door, maybe footsteps that you know don't belong there. The shooter's coming. You've got 10 seconds, 10 heartbeats, 10 moments that could decide everything. So, what do you want your child to do? Do you want them to sit there frozen, hoping, praying that somehow this nightmare passes? Or do you want them to act? Do you want them to do whatever it takes to survive? Lock the door, push the desks, the chairs, anything heavy, get out of sight, throw what you can, get out the window, run if you can, fight if you have to. Every choice, every frantic second could be the thin line between life and death. So when I talk about it like that, you can feel it, can't you? You can feel the fear, the desperation, the raw need to survive. That's what your child would feel. So hope alone won't save them, but action just might. So to do that, what do we need? We need to have a plan. So why does having a plan matter? That's like an important question, isn't it? Now, most people don't really realize that you already trust plans every single day. You know, you practice fire drills, even though we don't expect to have a fire. We listen to safety briefings every time we get on a plane, even though we assume we're going to land safely. In Australia, we prepare for bushfires before smoke even appears. None of these plans means we're living in fear. They just mean we're living with a little bit of foresight. Because when a real emergency hits, the brain doesn't have time to invent a strategy. It's going to fall back onto whatever it's been practiced or imagined before. Because without a plan, people hesitate, they freeze, or they just follow the crowd, hoping somebody's going to take charge. But with a plan, movement becomes more automatic. Panic is replaced by direction. Now, obviously, look, a plan doesn't guarantee safety, but it can dramatically reduce confusion. And in moments of chaos, reducing confusion could be the difference between being trapped and being able to get out. So one of the things we have to understand is denial. All right. How many of you, if you're honest, if you're really honest, believe this could never happen in your workplace or in your school or in your city? Yeah, most people don't think it's going to happen. And denial is one of the most dangerous survival killers. It's that voice in your head, isn't it, that goes, well, it will never happen in Australia until it does. Well, yeah, okay, it happened in Australia, but that was over there. It won't happen in this state. And then it happens. Well, yeah, I know it was in the state, but it's never going to happen in my city, is it? And then it happens. You can see where we're going with this. Because for most people, it's far easier to live in denial than to face uncomfortable possibilities. It feels safer to push that thought aside than to imagine what it would really be like to be caught in such a horrible situation, such horrible violence. But just because you're in denial, it doesn't stop the event. It just is going to delay your response to it. Now, in Australia, in the UK especially, we've seen so many serious incidents involving knives in shopping centres, public transport, schools. We've seen vehicles used as weapons. We see youths carry knives more often. We've even recently had that machete banned. Now, yeah, we don't see the same number of active shooter events here as we do in the US. But if I flew to Las Vegas for a holiday, right, and I happened to be at the Mandalay Bay Music Festival that night, the shooter opened fire from the hotel window, guess what? I would have been involved in an active shooter incident. It doesn't matter that I'm Australian. It doesn't matter that I thought, oh, it's never going to happen to me. The reality would have arrived, and my survival would have depended on how quickly I could face that and act. So the other thing in Australia, I hear it all the time. Whenever we do these sessions, I hear it all the time. Well, we just need more laws. Everybody say it with me: law-abiding criminal. It sounds stupid, doesn't it? It sounds ridiculous, because it is. Laws only work for those people who are willing to follow them. Laws just keep honest people honest. But the hard truth is, by the time an attacker's made that choice to pick up a gun or a knife, whatever they're using, and to walk into a public place and start attacking people, they've pretty much decided that the law doesn't apply to them. And no piece of legislation, no policy in a handbook is going to just snap them back into law-abiding behavior in that moment. It's not to say that laws don't matter. Of course they do. They set the framework for society. But in an active shooter situation, the law isn't what's going to be able to be the thing that saves you. So let's have a look at the reality. Okay, when most people hear the word active shooter, they often picture one scenario. It's a person with a firearm. But in reality, violent attacks in public and workplace settings, they don't always involve guns, especially in places where, like Australia, where access to firearms is restricted. Attacks can involve knives, blunt objects, vehicles, improvised weapons, fire, bombs, even coordinated physical assaults. The common factor isn't the weapon, it's the intent and the speed of harm. And that's why this training isn't about one specific threat. It's about recognizing danger early and responding effectively no matter what form it takes. Because in reality, what most people experience first is not a clear view of a threat. It's confusion, because information is coming in fragments. The sounds you hear, they don't make sense right away because you're not used to them. People begin moving, but maybe not always in the right direction. You might hear shouting or crashing or footsteps, or you don't even know what's happening and you're already confused. And in many cases, you might not actually see the attacker at all, just the reactions of other people running, for example. And that uncertainty is what causes the most harm. Because when the brain doesn't understand what's happening, what does it do? It hesitates. It tries to fill in the gaps. It looks for confirmation instead of taking action. And that delay, those few seconds of, oh my goodness, what's going on, could be more dangerous than the threat itself. So let's start by reframing the goal. Your goal obviously isn't to be a hero. Your goal is to make smart, fast decisions under pressure. The strongest person in the room is not the one who can fight. It's the one who can think clearly when everybody else is stuck. That's what I want to build into this session today. So to do that, we need to understand what happens when stress hits. And this is critical. We need to understand what will happen to us mentally and physically under stress. Because let's face it, an active shooter event, an active threat, is probably going to be the most stressful event you're ever going to face in your life. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Under stress, your body and brain will not work the way you think they will. You might imagine yourself being calm and decisive and logical, but the reality is that during stressful events, your body chemistry takes over. I'm sure you've all heard of fight or flight, but there's another one, isn't there? Freeze. Freeze happens when the brain's overloaded with just too much information and not enough certainty. The mind can't immediately work out what's happening. What's the safe adoption, or whether moving might make it worse. So because it can't decide, what does it do? It hits the pause button. And if you haven't practiced a response, your brain doesn't magically invent one under pressure. It's hesitating, it's frozen, it stalls. Now, in normal, safe, everyday environments, your brain runs on prediction and pattern. You know what's supposed to happen next. But when something violently breaks that pattern, maybe it's that scream in the office, maybe the bang in the supermarket, maybe it's that sudden act of aggression. Now the mind struggles to reconcile what it's seeing with what it expects. And that mismatch creates that moment of disbelief. How this isn't real, this can't be happening to me. What am I actually looking at here? And that mental argument costs time. And we're starting to understand that under real world threat, time's everything. Because under that extreme stress, what does the body do? It does other things, but the three main things it does. Number one, the vision narrows. You get that? I'm sure you've all heard tunnel vision. You see what's right in front of you, but you don't really see what's going on around you. So you might miss the exit, another attacker, whatever it might be. Your hearing becomes selective or muted. So maybe you don't hear the warning signs. Maybe you don't hear the shout to come over here where the exits are, whatever it might be. But the biggest one, I think, is thinking. You lose the clarity. Because of the hormones being released, that blood rushing through the body is moving away from the brain. So your thinking isn't as clear. It's more emotional. It's more delayed. So this is why in events you often see people just standing still and staring, or looking around for authority or instruction to be told what to do, because they're waiting for somebody else to move first, or they assume it's going to be nothing. And that's a delay that can cost lives. So with training, even just this little bit we're doing today, instead of freezing, you can transition to action, because now you're moving through the steps you've already mentally rehearsed. So we need to install a very simple override system. All right. Instead of thinking, oh my God, what's happening? Now we can change it. Now we can go, okay, what's important now? And what that really means is, what's my best safe action right now? Because again, under stress, the brain is craving certainty. It wants the perfect answer, the perfect plan, the perfect escape route. But in a real incident, perfection doesn't exist. You got incomplete information. Conditions are changing. People are panicking. Sound, movement, confusion. Whoa, the senses are getting overloaded. So when people ask themselves, what should I do? They often end up choosing nothing at all, because the mind is so overwhelmed by all these different options. So that's why this question is so powerful. What's important now? It doesn't ask for the perfect action. It just asks for the best safe action for this moment. And that's a decision that you can make. It's forcing your brain to scan for the one thing that increases your safety immediately, instead of spiraling into hundreds of worst case scenarios. So what's important now? It might be, I'm going to step back into the nearest doorway. Maybe I drop down behind the cover over here. Maybe I go into the room and I lock and barricade a door. Maybe I move with purpose to the exit. Maybe the sound's over there, so I put distance between me and the sounds. Maybe it's getting your phone out, call the emergency services. Maybe later on, maybe it's applying pressure to a wound that somebody's been injured on. Maybe I need to pull myself or somebody else to safety. So again, none of these actions are going to be perfect, but all of them are going to be better than freezing. Now, it sounds like that's going to be really hard to do, and under stress, absolutely, you've got to train this stuff. But there are something called windows of opportunity, and these are brief moments during like an active event where maybe the attacker's distracted, or maybe they're unaware of your presence, maybe they're disorientated. For whatever reason, they're just unable to act effectively. So windows of opportunities mean that in those moments, you may have a chance to escape, move, or maybe even intervene. And these windows might not be huge. They might only last a second or a split second. But in a situation, that few seconds might be all you need. So this is where the main crux of what we're teaching comes in, our framework. We call it get out, hide out, take out, help out. Get out, hide out, take out, help out. It's not a checklist. It's like a compass. You know, people will move between these stages depending on where the threat is, or where the exits are, where other people are, what's the physical environment. But the priority is still the same, no matter what order. Get out. I want to create distance away from what's happening. Hide out. Well, maybe I need to hide and barricade. So denial of access to stop them getting to us. As a last resort, take out. Maybe I need to do something to physically stop the threat, because I have no option because they've come into the room I was hiding in. And then we got help out, which is preservation after the event, whether it's helping people, listening to the police officers when they arrive, dealing with your own emotional output after the event. Because at the end of the day, you don't rise to the level of your training, you fall to the level of your preparation. So let's talk about get out. Okay, what is get out? Imagine there's an active shooter event. It's happening right now. What's your first priority? Simple. Remove yourself and others from close proximity to the attacker. Now, the statistics show that only about 2% of active shooter incidents involve more than one shooter. So statistically, if the threat is inside, what's your safest move? To get outside. Now, you've all heard of different things, run, hide, fight, and things like that, and most training tells people to run. But if you just run in panic, often that's going to send people straight into the danger. So we need to understand the purposeful evacuation. The same way, look, if there's a fire, I wouldn't run through the door to the fire, would I? I'd run and try and get out the opposite way. So the critical principles we want to think about are, I want to move away from the threat, but also out of its line of movement. You know, if he has a gun, he can shoot one direction. I want to be in a different direction. I want to avoid choke points. That's things like, you know, narrow hallways or entrances or escalators. Because if we're all trying to go through that same place, everybody bunches up. What does that do for the attacker? Well, it makes it easier for them to target multiple people at once because he knows that these are escape routes. So that's where they're going to focus their attention. So wherever you are right now, okay, if you're in the house, wonderful. But you could even do this in your office and things like that. Without moving, where's your nearest exit? So just point to it and great, there's your nearest exit. Fantastic. But what if that exit wasn't an option all of a sudden? For whatever reason, maybe that's where the shooter's coming in. Maybe that's where the knife attack is coming in. What would you do next? And most people don't even consider it. They don't even think about what would happen in their home or in their office. So for me, I've got a door behind me. I have a window here. Could that be an exit? Absolutely. But how can I use that as an exit? Well, I need to break the window. So what do I have that can break it? If I don't have anything here to break it, I don't know how useful it's going to be as an exit. So I need to know how to break it. Obviously, hitting it in the middle of the window is not going to be effective. But if I can hit it on the edge, great. But now the window's broken. Am I going to cut myself and bleed out? Or could I get something to cover and push the glass away and get out? So you can see we need to understand a bit more than just having, oh, I know where one exit is. We need to have more than one exit, because if that's blocked, and I'm not just talking about an active intruder, what if it was a fire and the fire was outside that exit? I need to find another way. So these are the kind of things we want to think about. So let's imagine that we are in a shopping center, could be in a school, it doesn't really matter. But here's what I want you to do. I want everybody to stand up. Okay, right now, just stand up where you are. First thing I want you to do is put your hands up as tall as you can and stand as tall as you can. How quickly do you think you could move like that? If you had to run and everything was up tall, how quickly could you run? Yeah, not very fast. So this time, go as low as you can. Like right down, really bend those knees, get your head down as low as you get lower. How quickly do you think you can move like that? Again, not very fast. I agree. My knees hurt just thinking about that. But what we do want to do is we want to make ourselves a smaller target, because if you think about it, most shooters are aiming at standing high. They're not professional shooters. They're just like you and me. They've got a gun, but they probably haven't got that much experience of using it. So if I can lower my profile, what they're used to seeing through their sight picture, what they can see through their targeting, is now slightly different to what they've practiced with. So we might be enough to make it harder for you to be hit. So we don't want to be tall. We don't want to be small. We want to be somewhere in the middle. So stand up again. And now just softly bend your knees like you're ready to do a standing sprint. Have your hands up like you're ready to catch a ball. And just keep those elbows tucked in, because these elbows are going to protect your vital organs. For me, I like to keep my hands up to think about protecting my vital organs and my neck and things like that. You'd keep your down low, eyes forwards, and we want to think about not a shuffle, not a full sprint, but gliding. Stay small, keep moving, because if I can run quickly like this, I'm now going to be able to move faster with being a harder target to hit. If I've got something I can pick up and hold, like a keyboard or a computer or something like that, now I can have that as protection as well. So if we understand how to run, I've spotted my exits. I've got two choices. How do I actually get there? How do I get there quickly, and how do I get there safely? And that's what we want to think about: cover and concealment. So within every surrounding area, within the environment, you'll have things that are cover. So cover is like protection. It stops bullets or has a really good chance of stopping bullets. Think concrete walls, steel doors, thick trees, filing cabinets, even a heavy desk. Cover stops bullets. And then you've got concealment. So concealment, I like to think, is hiding. It might not stop a bullet, but it might keep me out of sight. So maybe it's curtains, maybe it's bushes, maybe it's the shadows and darkness. So the rule of thumb would be, if you can find cover, brilliant, take cover. If not, concealment is still better than standing in the open. So next time you're in your office where you work or at school, have a look around. If somebody was to come in an active threat environment, what could you use as cover? Where could you run to that offers you cover? Or if you can't run, what offers you concealment? Now we're starting to think. Now already we're starting to build a plan. So when do we run? That's the next question, isn't it? How can I do it with have the best chance of not being seen by that shooter? So we use something called 10 and 2. So now imagine you're standing in the center of a clock and 12 o'clock is right in front of you. Your natural field of vision extends from about 10 o'clock to about 2 o'clock. And this is where your eyes naturally focus. So everybody put your arms out like this, 10 and 2. And I just want you to wiggle your fingers, but stay looking forwards. Everything outside that wiggle is your peripheral vision, which means it's pretty much less clear to see. Like you can see your fingers wiggle when it's a 10 and 2. So this time, put your arms all the way out to the end, out to the edges, like a 9 and 3. And wiggle your fingers. It's much harder to see, isn't it? 10 and 2, I can see. 9 and 3, much harder. So now I'm creating some blind spots. And the shooter's no different. They can't shoot what they can't see, because with a gun, they're focused forward, so they've got their 10 and 2. So if you're outside that 10 and 2, you become a target. You become harder to target. So if we see the shooter and we can see that he's looking as 10 and 2 is focused over there, that might give us some room to run over here. Now, what if we can't get out? Exit's brilliant. We knew to exit, but whatever reason, we couldn't get out. Now we move on to the next one, hide out. And remember, this is just a strategy for each level. It doesn't mean we have to go get out and then hide out. And no, if we can get out, we get out. If we have to hide out, we have to hide out. The goal of the hideout is not just hiding. It's denial of access, to give everybody in here the chance to stop the attacker coming in and start building a plan. The goal to slow that attacker down and make it harder for them, so they're more likely to move on because they're looking for easy, accessible targets. So we call it lock it and block it. Super simple. If the door locks, lock it. Simple. Now we can start blocking it. We can start pushing heavy furniture or equipment or anything solid in front of that door. We like to think of it as the 3Ds: dense, disruptive, and durable. So dense, think like heavy. A desk is great. A filing cabinet, brilliant. A bookshelf, amazing. Nice and heavy. And then we think disruptive. So now we can add to it. We can mess it up. We can make it harder for somebody to get through. Let's get some more chairs. Let's angle them on it. Let's tie the two things together. Let's stack more on stop. Because now I'm trying to buy time and add confusion to that person. Now it's harder for them to get through. Now we want to make it durable. Can we lock things together? Can we tie them together with coats? Can we wedge something in? We don't want to just trust that one layer. Let's keep layering it up. Maybe we can use desks or tables or bookshelves. Can I jam a chair underneath the handle? Can I jam a couple of chairs together to make it harder to move? Can I have a look at the door closer and use something like a HDMI cable and wrap that around to make it harder for the door to open? Can I turn that filing cabinet sideways and place it on the floor? Can I wedge it so if he does push, I got enough things pushing to the back wall, so now the wall is helping me? Printers, bins, water coolers. What have I got that I could use? That's what we want to think about doing now. Once we're barricaded, let's get the lights off. Let's get our phones on silent. Let's not whisper when we're near the doors. Let's spread out so we're not in one area if he does come in. But now we can start working on a plan. Doesn't mean we have to speak. We can start to work on a plan with hand signals, with drawing. But now we're sort of making a better decision, aren't we? Now we're deciding that, hey, we had to hide, we had to barricade, but now we're in this room and there's a window there. Maybe now we can use that as our exit. So you see, we went from get out. Well, we weren't able to get out. So we went to hide out, but it gave us the option to get out again. So we want to think about this. It's not a simple 1, 2, 3, 4 system. It's what's available to you at the right time. So here's where it gets a little bit tricky for people. What if so far every option has failed? What if you can't run? What if there wasn't enough time to hide? What if every other option you did failed? Well, that's when action becomes necessary. Now, this might be an absolute last resort. You literally have no other choice. Your distance, your barriers, avoidance, none of that's possible anymore. That danger has entered your personal space. What do we do? What do we do? We have to do something. So the key principles that would help, numbers. If we can get a group of people, a coordinated group response, even without planning, it's going to be more effective than one person acting alone. But we know about the bystander effect. If nobody does anything, nobody does anything. So you might have to be the person that starts what we need to do. Guys, we've got to go, 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 go. That might be what it be. Maybe surprise. Most attackers don't expect resistance, especially if they have a weapon. The weapon in their mind makes them automatically faster and stronger than everybody. So what if you give them that resistance? That could be enough to create that critical window for others to move to safety or to nullify that attacker. And this is where you can see now commitment matters. Half measures, hesitation, that's just going to increase danger. If action does become unavoidable, you've got to be decisive, hopefully collective, but you've got to be committed. You have to do what it takes to do what you need to do at that moment. And that's a scary thought for a lot of people. But again, what is the alternative? If you don't do anything, now you're relying on hope. But the second that safe opening appears, well, now what's the priority? Get out if you can. That immediate exit, distance, get away from danger. This is not about confrontation for its own sake. This is like not be a hero because you'll be on TV going, hey, I stopped an attacker. No, this is, we need to do everything to create time and space and an opportunity to survive. And maybe the only opportunity is to deal with that person because we have no other choice. Remember, we're not going to rush directly into that obvious danger. We want to avoid the threat's direct focus and line of harm whenever possible. So do you remember we said about the 10 and 2? Specifically, if we can, we want to be in their blind spots. So a simple way to visualize, imagine the shooter's wearing a sports jersey and their name's on the back and the name says shooter or knife attacker or whatever it might be. If you can see their name, guess what? You're going to be in their blind spot. So resistance, if it becomes unavoidable, it's going to be far more effective when it comes from outside of their focus and in their blind spot, because that's what they're not expecting. And if you've got more than one person and can do it from more than one direction at once, now we've got a better chance. This is where group action can change that outcome. Several people moving together, we don't even have to speak, let's just go, can create enough disruption, enough overload to break that attacker's momentum and open a chance for others to escape. But I want to be super clear about this. In a real life confrontation, getting away is always the best option. But if you have no choice, nothing's going to be clean. Nothing's going to be perfect. Adrenaline's going to be high from you and from the attacker. Fine motor skills, those small, precise movements, they're gone. In an adrenalized state, your body is going to default to instinctive and bigger, larger, more basic movements. That's why your only focus in that moment is got to be to limit their ability to cause further harm and get yourself and others to safety the second a chance appears. So, can I place barriers in the way? Can I increase distance? Can I create an obstacle or distraction or a delay that buys me and my team and the people I'm with a few more seconds? Could I use a chair to fend them off? Could I find an improvised weapon like a drink bottle, a metal drink bottle? Could I have a fire extinguisher as a weapon? Scissors? Could we all pick up keyboards? We have options. But remember, this is an absolute last resort. But if you've got to do it, you've got to do it. I would rather you found the exit, but that might not be an opportunity for you to do that. And the final thing we want to look at is help out, the aftermath. So let's say the attacker is out. Do we want to re-enter danger? No, what do we want to do? We want to call the emergency services if we haven't already, and we want to give them the facts of what's happened. We want to give them the location, the description of what's happened, the injuries, so they now know what to send and who to send and how many. And while we're waiting for them, in a mass casualty incident, uncontrolled bleeding is actually the single greatest preventable cause of death from trauma. Victims don't necessarily die from the bullet or from the cut, but they die from bleeding out before emergency help can reach them. So, for example, do you know how to apply simple bleeding control? So at the Professional Self-Defense Association, we do something called PAD training, which we came up with, which is pressure, a direct pressure with cloth or clothing, whatever it needs to be to stop the bleeding. Once we can stop and slow that bleeding, now we can apply a dressing to keep that pressure in place. And now we can deal with shock. We can keep that person warm and we can talk to them and reassure them to stop the body from shutting down. We don't need to be a paramedic. We don't need to be trained in everything else. If we can just apply some pressure, put on a dressing and deal with shock, we're helping people. So let's say we're in the process of that and the police arrive. All right, the police come through. when they arrive, they're going to be adrenalized. They're going to be entering into that area and they don't know what they're going to meet. So the calmer and clearer and more cooperative you are, the faster the officers can distinguish you from a threat, and then they can secure the scene. Their first and only priority is going to be, in those first moments, is stopping the threat if it hasn't been stopped. That means they may bypass injured people without stopping. They're going to move with urgency and maybe even aggression. Their focus is not going to be on you. It's on eliminating the attacker if he hasn't been stopped already. So keep your hands visible at all times. Raise them up, palms open, fingers spread. What does this tell somebody straight away? I'm not a threat to you. I have nothing in my hands. Anything in your hands, put it down. Phone, bag, jacket, an improvised weapon that you had. Get rid of it. Could a phone in a hand, could that look like a gun to somebody? Could that look like a weapon to somebody who's just coming in and has to make split-second decisions? Same thing. We want to avoid sudden movements. I don't want to reach out or point or run towards an officer, because what do they think you might be? So we want to stay calm and we follow instructions. That way, we can all get out calmly and safely. Now, also within Help Out, whether you were directly involved, whether you helped others, whether you witnessed the event is one thing, but the aftermath can be just as overwhelming. So let's go with some key things to expect after the event and how you could take care of yourself and others. Because surviving violence is going to trigger some intense emotions in you. There's different things that might happen. Maybe after extreme stress, you might feel totally drained. You might feel shaky, exhausted, or even numb. You might have sleep issues, emotional swings. You might go from relief to anger and then sadness, or you might feel nothing at all. And these are all normal responses to abnormal events. So realistically, we want to bring ourselves back to normality when we are able to. So trying to stay active, focusing on routine, talking to somebody, It's about finding something positive to lean on, something that reminds you that you're in control and you still have a say in your life. It's a sucky situation, and I hope you never have to be in it. But you can see we don't need mega complex ideas to build a plan to allow us to do something. Something will always be better than nothing. So didn't want to make this a super long session. I just wanted to give you some simple ideas that will help you understand, well, actually, there are things I can do. So if after this, it's got you thinking, well, actually, that's great, but I want to actually participate. I want to take part in this. I want to understand and do the drills so that I can actually apply them. Just reach out to us. Send me a private message. Let me know, hey, I'm with a school and we think we need to be doing this. I'm with a company. Maybe me and my family need to do it. When's your next course? Because our goal is to get this information out there. Because the more trained you are, the more likely you are to react better under pressure. Again, there's no black and white saying this will work every single time. That's not what we're saying. All we're trying to say is if you have options, you have choices, and you have a plan, you're more prepared than you were when you didn't have that. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and I will make this recording available to everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.